All right, so it's only appropriate that we start out talking about water because water is life, right? So everybody's probably heard the saying that you can go 3 days without water before your body starts to literally shut down. So whether we're talking about survival, homesteading, end of the world, whatever, bottom line is water is critical to everything, to our irrigation, to our bodies, our animals, everything. So to me, when you think about water and how to set up your property or whatever, you want to think in terms of redundancy. You don't want to rely on a single source. So for example, Andy has well water. Well water is great, but depending on the depth of the well, the availability of electricity, so if power goes out and your pump is electric, then it's kind of hard to get water out of the well. So you can think in terms of redundancy on your well by solar pumps and things like that. Of course, that depends on your static level, meaning at what depth is the top of your water in your well. So if it's too deep, then it's hard to pump. Most solar pumps are limited in depth, and a lot of other pumps, your hand pumps, your windmill driven pumps, those are all going to have depth limits. So a lot of these wells in different parts of Texas can be, 1,000 feet deep, and you've got to have a deep water pump, which is typically going to run on 220 volt, and if power's out, that's going to be hard to replace. So think in terms of where else can we get water. Andy, of course, has a pool. A pool is a great source of water, but it's limited. How many thousand gallons is your pool? 11,500. So
of course, if the pump stops,
so
it's
that's
gonna go bad.
So that's like 10,285 toilet flushes, and Andy will use that in a week.
I might run out of toilet paper before then, though.
So anyway, pool water, that's a great source of water. We're not really talking about filtration and stuff, but you also got to think about what is your source of water, and do you need to think about filtration?
Option for that, and to filter out the chlorine, a Berkey is a good option for that.
Absolutely.
And it's a gravity fed, so no electricity needed. So you just pour it in the top, and it gravity feeds through 2 different filter systems. One's a charcoal, and those filters take out the sediments and all that kind of stuff, but it also removes the chlorine. So you could actually drink the pool water once it's filtered through. During the outage or the Snowmageddon in February, we did lose water running to our house, so we had plenty of bottled water on hand. We actually use pool water though to flush our toilets and to wash dishes. So we were okay, So water, that's the key to life.
And another great redundancy Andy has is the lake right there. So he's already talked about for Christmas this year, Jeannie's getting a head wrap and a basket of some sort, or I think she's got to weave her own or something to carry water from the lake. Great source of water. I mean, there's a lot of several million gallons there. But with lake water, you got to think about contaminants. You have to think about both natural contaminants, whether giardia from animals and things like that, bacterias, whatever. So that's going to require boiling or filtration, both. And then you also have to think about, if you're by a lake, what are the things around that lake? Are there sewage plants nearby that could fail and overflow into the lake and contaminate? You just don't know. If you walk down to the lake one day to get water and you see dead fish everywhere, you're probably going to think twice about getting that water, So the more levels of redundancy that you have, the better off you'll be, because that every different source, is a capability. It's a resource that's backed up by another resource. So the old saying, one is none, two is one, two is one, one is none. That I think there's no example better than water that applies to, because bottom line, you can't live without it. So
Yeah.
we've worked through pretty much everything Andy's got available except rainwater, and that's the next one. So Andy has set up a rain catchment system because he's got metal roofs, and metal roof is probably one of your best types of catchment, you know, because it's cleaned easier. So the first rains typically wash it off, and he'll walk you through his system. But the bottom line is, when you think in terms of rainwater, that's going to be also dependent on your location, because some places it rains more than others. Out in East Texas, for example, we average like 38 inches of rain per year. So we get a lot of rain out there. And Lorena and I are building a homestead, so we're totally off grid still. No water, no nothing. And we got tired of hauling water all the time, and our stays were getting longer and longer. So we finally said, you know, we really need to come up with a solution for the rainwater, but we haven't built our first building yet, so we don't have a roof to collect with or anything. So what we did is we started using tarps, and we evolved through many different trials and errors of, I mean, the very first one, we threw a tarp over our tractor and ran it down into the bucket, and so the water came down and it ran into the bucket, and we had a really good storm. I think we collected like 100 gallons just like that, and then we run it through filters and stuff from there. Well, then we had some big 2,500 gallon water tanks that we had purchased for future plans to drill wells. And so then what we started doing was using these tarp setups to collect the water, and then pumping it out of the whatever catchment system we set up, pumping it through a sediment filter, and then filling our water tanks. And we literally have collected well over 5,000 gallons of water just by doing that. So I guess when you're talking about collection, you have to think the formula. What's the formula for how much water I can get? So the formula is square footage. What is the square footage of your collection? So that's basically length times width in feet. So if you've got, say, a 10 by 10 collection, that's going to be 100 square feet. So 100 square feet then multiplied by 0.65. So basically, I mean, you could say 65%. So 1 inch of rain is going to give you approximately 0.65 collection of water. So in 100 square feet, 1 inch of rain will give you about 650 gallons of rain collection. So then you have to think in terms of, okay, what's my usage? How much water do I need to survive? How much capability do I have as far as storing that water? So, you know, in a, say, shit hits the fan scenario, you may think in terms of, I need water bottles, jugs, collecting anything you can to put water in. And then, of course, if your surface is clean, generally you're not going to have to worry about a lot of bacteria and things like that in the rainwater. So your risk, I guess, is a little bit lower, but that doesn't mean it's without risk. You know, for example, a bird can fly over and poop on your collection surface, and that's going to contaminate your water. So you really still need to think about filtration. But if you don't have access to filtering systems and things like that, if you were to drink your rainwater through like a life straw, or dump it into a Berkey and filter it through, I mean, those are, you know, 99.9% removal rates of bacterias and things like that. Maybe viruses can get through you, so you could get COVID from it, but
But if you wear your mask while you're drinking it.
yes, absolutely. Drink through your mask, you'll be safe.
The tarp thing he's talking about, we used to do that on sailboats. Not that we ever had to use it, but we had a device, or I had a device that I could string between the shrouds. And then I had a tailpiece, a plastic tailpiece in the center of the tarp that would go through and tighten up. And it was like a 1 inch, 3/4, 1 inch tailpiece. And then you could hook a hose, a flexible hose on that, and then you could run that over into your water tanks during a rainstorm. And luckily we had enough tankage, we didn't have to do that, but we had to think ahead.
Yeah.
And also another thing you need to have in your little box is some good sponges, because even in the driest of times, we have moisture. Your windows will condensate, and you can actually collect a lot of moisture off your windows. May not be the cleanest, but again, you can filter it and boil it and do whatever. And it doesn't take much to fill a sponge up, whereas without it, it's difficult to get. Also, Andy, how deep is your well here?
I think it's between 600 and 700 feet.
Between 600 and 700?
Yeah.
That's a little far. We have on one of our systems a piece of 3-inch PVC pipe,
right,
with a catch in it, and a long rope that we can actually pull our submersible out,
right,
and drop that down and pull up a gallon, gallon and a half at a time.
right.
Because it'll sink, and then when you pull it up, the flap closes and you can get your water like that.
Yeah.
600-700 feet.
That's a long way.
That would be woman's work. You would need to have a crank deal.
Hey, a winch. You need a winch or that.
Is that what he said?
A well winch. The well winch.
We know who's going in the pool first.
I mean, the 600 or 700 feet to the lake's closer. So
Yeah.
So yeah, I think in terms of, survival, it is partly about thinking ahead. It's about whether you should have some, tarps set aside for that purpose. But think in terms too, if you're going to use tarps. So one thing we've discovered in Texas is tarps bake. So you can put out a tarp and start out with a nice tarp that's collecting water just great. But after a few weeks baking in the sun, then if it's like one of those silver tarps, for example, the silver stuff starts to flake, and you end up with all kind of contaminants, that you got to filter out. So one of the things we bought when we were doing the tractor thing, instead of putting a tarp in the bucket, we used a pond liner. We bought a pond liner at like Lowe's or something, and threw that in there, and that actually worked real good, and it holds up. We buy our tarps cheap at Harbor Freight, so the big thing is just knowing that they do have a limited life, and if you're shit hits the fan, I probably wouldn't leave them out all the time. I'd put them out in a rainstorm, and we've done that. I mean, when we were first starting to do rainwater collection, we had set up some tarps. We thought we had this great setup where we had draped them over. I got a big 30-foot trailer, and I draped it over this trailer and had it all running down towards the ground, and then running into another tarp, and had this great setup that I thought was awesome. I'm like, this is going to work great. I don't even remember how many square foot of coverage I had set up, and we were ready. And then before the rain came, a big windstorm came. And I was like, damn it, I know those tarps are getting blown all over the place. So then, of course, the rain comes. And y'all know how it rains in Texas. I mean, it started just with a little bit, and then all of a sudden it was a gusher. And it was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm like, well, I need to go look and see if the tarps are set up. So I got up and put on my rain gear and went out, and all them tarps was a mess. They weren't collecting nothing. I went back, I told Lorena, I said, well, if we're going to collect any rain, we're going to have to go out there and do it ourselves, because everything's a mess. So middle of the night, I mean, it's literally like 3 o'clock in the morning. We put on our rain gear, we run out into the storm, and I mean, it was pouring. And we literally are out there spreading tarps back out and setting up, just on the fly, we're making it work, and then we discovered how water was running, and I said, you know what, we got this. What I had done, I had taken my dozer years before that and cleared a flat area where we camp, and so the road comes down and then it kind of dips down where I had cut in with the dozer, and then you got a big flat area, and I said, pull the tarp over there, and then we started setting up empty 5-gallon buckets and gas cans and everything to make this shape where the tarp, we could drape over it, and it created this natural pond. And that was like our best collection. And we literally, the rest of the night, we were out there just running around, and as things were filling up with water, we had a pump that hooked to a 12-volt battery, and we were pumping water through the sediment filter and into the tanks, and just like crazy running around all night long. But the next morning we looked and we were like, damn, though, we collected like 600 gallons or something, and we were like, oh, that was cool. And then another, yeah, right. No, then we stayed up and went to work. Then another time we had we got a shipping container, and we tied tarps to the top of that and then draped it down and tied them off to some equipment so that you had this valley that dropped down, and then we put a 110-gallon water trough there and let that collect water. And the wind, of course, caught that thing, and we were both out there literally in the storm holding on to the tarp. And I mean, it would practically lift Lorena off the ground, you know, is when the wind would catch that thing. Yeah. And but now we worked through it. So looking back on it, it was actually kind of fun, and it's a funny memory to think about what we went through to collect that water. But we learned so much from it, you know, and like I say, in a survival scenario, you're gonna do what it takes to collect that water. And so I think the knowledge is the most important thing of understanding, you know, what different things can we do. We all understand the traditional stuff, you know. We understand that your water heater, for example, holds a certain amount of water, so you can drain that and get, you know, fresh drinkable water. But that's only going to last so long. You got to be thinking in the, how long is this event going to last long term? What are all my different resources available, and then how can I plan ahead to be able to use those resources? And you know, we think in terms of, well, if I'm out on the trail, I probably carry some sort of filtration system in my bug out bag or whatever, my get home bag, whatever. And that filtration system, you know, I go right down to the lake here and pump water or suck it through a life straw or whatever. That's going to sustain me, but that's only going to work for so long. If it's an extended event or something, you're going to want to think, okay, what am I going to do in the long term? Right. You know, and so
delivery is another thing. It's like, say you have your storage like this.
Yeah.
Well, how are you going to get the water out of that if you do have it? I know out in a lot of places on these off-grid deer camps, they'll have a windmill, and they'll pump fresh water into a system, and then if they've got a house, what they do is they put a small solar panel with a battery and a 12-volt pump.
Yep.
And they will hook that pump straight into their hose bib or whatever onto their house. Then you can just go into your house. It's like an RV. Now,
yep,
maybe you'd have to have a really, really good demand pump for this house. But if you've got a small area like this little house over there, that's just a shower maybe and a sink, then you're set up for getting showers and stuff. But
yep,
it's, you know, it's delivery. How are you going to get it from there unless you're going to put a hose bib down at the bottom of that? You know, it's kind of hard to take a shower. You'd have to lay on the ground, but get a 12-volt demand pump. Then you can pump that water anywhere.
Yeah, if you can get it uphill, you know, there's a certain value in gravity flow, for example. Mm-hmm. And believe it or not, if you can, so depending on your source of water, so if like you're in the city and you're connected to city water, if you go out and shut off the connection to the main, So you're basically isolated your house, and then let's say you've got a collection tank that sits, you know, uphill from your house. You could then take a simple garden hose with a female adapter so that you can hook both sides to a spigot, and you could hook at the bottom of your tank, you can put a water spigot, and then you can hook that into an outside spigot on your house, and it'll provide water to your entire house. Now, you ain't gonna have a lot of pressure. Well, depending on the height. If you got a lot of uphill height, I can't remember the formula for, you know, each foot of drop, how much pressure you get. But, you know, if you've got a big tank, like even that tank over there, or he's got another tank up here, right?
2,500 gallons.
Yeah, 2,500 gallon up there. So if you've got a tank full, and that's going to create a little bit of pressure, and at a minimum, you know, your toilets might fill slow, but they'll fill. Your sink might flow slow, but it'll flow. Shower, it might be a little bit tougher because it's elevated, and you know, right. So you might want to come up with a different solution to that, a 5-gallon bucket with a deal on it or something, you know. There you go. There you go. And that's the thing too, if you understand, David and I were talking earlier about travel trailers and the technology in them, the 12-volt setup and everything. So our first water catchment that we were doing, that's exactly what we were using. We were using a 12-volt RV pump to move that water. Now we've got better transfer pumps and everything because we pump hundreds of gallons at a time. But the nice thing about the little RV pumps is they have like a built-in pressure gauge and everything. So they'll pressure up to like 50, 60 pounds of pressure, and then they automatically shut off. And you could literally run a house on it as long as you're only running one thing at a time. A closed system. So like I said, you can put a hose to a spigot. If you put a RV pump in between that with a 12-volt battery and a solar panel to charge it, you can pretty much run indefinitely. But that's going to give you enough, I think average, I want to say 3 gallons per minute is what those pumps are probably. There's ones that do a little bit more or a little bit less, but average one probably about 3 gallons per minute. So you could literally run a shower on that.
So even if we lost power here at this house, the setup would still allow the water to trickle down. You wouldn't need to put the hose to it. If the power's out, the rainwater, not the rainwater, the well water coming out of the tank will still flow down here. But like you said, it's just a trickle. It's not anything that we could, you know, live long term on, maybe, you know. Well, and it's only 2,500 gallons too.
Yeah. So but if you can then, you know, work to have Jeannie carry enough water to keep it topped off every day, then that, you know, you're gonna stay at 2,500 if she works enough.
Yeah.
You know.
How long do you think 2,500 would last you?
Go ahead.
What's it?
How long do you think 2,500 gallons would last you?
Well, he spends a lot of time on the toilet.
Well, it lasted us at least, we know at least 3 to 4 days, because we were living off of that during Snowmageddon.
Right.
No, it was froze up during Snowmageddon.
But it unfroze the next day.
Yeah, it was froze for 3 days. But when it did, you know, we still had power, so it pumped water here. Yeah. So the water. So we lost a pipe in there, and that's what she's talking about. After the water came back on, we still had the trickle coming from the tank, but we couldn't refill the tank.
Right.
That's what she's talking about. And we still had the trickle because it's not dependent upon that pump to get the water. The gravity is going to feed water down. And on this tank over here, we're going to talk about drip irrigation later on. The intent down the road is to get that tank to feed all the way around the pool for the plants around the pool. And it's downhill, so that will be gravity fed. We won't have to hook up a pump or anything to it.
Yeah, if you want to walk us through how you're doing the collection.
We're going to walk over here. Okay, so the second part of our rainwater catchment system, we're going to talk about this tank here. It's 1,100 gallons. We have another one is 800, and then we have our water well tank. that is 2,500 gallons. This tank here, we collect off this, this roof structure here, and it comes down into the gutter and it comes down here. The first thing that happens is this fills up with water. So you get the sediment off that first wash, and then after every heavy rain, you simply open this up and drain it out. I don't have my thing. So you empty that out, and so the next time it happens, it's like it washes off the sediment through the gutters, down here, fills up, and then goes in here and starts filling this. And there is an overflow valve too on this side. And this is, so once this tank gets full, it's gonna overflow and go this way. So if you have a way, you could even do water catchment coming out of this. This one is open, as you can see, but there's a screen up here to prevent mosquitoes from going up and in and laying eggs. So let's talk a little bit about well, my wife's got her soaker hoses here, watering her blueberries and her moringa trees over here. And that's gravity fed. And I'm not sure, is it working going up that way?
Yes, it works going up this way.
Okay, so even a little bit uphill, it'll still work.
But there's a lot of pressure on it because it's
yeah,
very tall.
yeah, that's true.
And it's filled.
Yep, it's full. So one of the other things that we're going to do, we're going to plant trees in the very back. So we're going to put a 400 to 600 gallon tank in the back where there's no roof or catchment system to fill that up with. So we'll just get a couple hoses, hook them together, hook them to this pump water out of this, you know, pump the floor to fill it up back there, and then the next time it rains, this will fill back up. So that, it's a little bit of extra work, but that's the only, rather than building a building back there, we can use some electric, and we've got a generator. If the power's out, we can actually still do it. Now coming from, we're also gonna put another tank back behind the greenhouse. We got a shed back there, and it's got a metal roof as well, and the water coming off of that's gonna fill up that. We're probably gonna put an 800 gallon back there. So we can move water throughout our property with this device here. We can move it no matter where we wanna take it. I mean, we've used it to, you know, water the garden or whatever when we needed to, if the power's out. So I do wanna give props to Jeff. They've got a page if you want to go see more about what they're doing on their property. It's called Back to Country, and that's on Facebook, so you can go out there and check that out. He's got some good videos out there. You got one on rainwater catchment even, don't you?
Yeah, we did do a couple of videos on our evolution of how we captured water to sustain ourselves while we're out there.
So if you're a visual person and want to see them on the ground doing that work, you can do that. But like he said at the beginning of all this, rain is, or water is life. And if you don't have a way to collect water when the shit hits the fan, then you've got to figure that out. And getting water out of the ground, from a lake, from rooftops, it matters that much. So anybody got any questions for Jeff or I? Any comments?
Same principle with Ibc Totes, right?
Ibc Totes.
Yes. So.
Oh yeah.
So the only negatives about Ibc Totes, first and foremost, is what was it used for prior. Sometimes they put chemicals and stuff in them, so you need to know it's a food grade and clean.
Yeah. Sometimes it's soap in there, you know.
This
so.
was
oil maybe.
Kind of oil.
Yeah.
Yeah, then the other thing about the Ibc Totes is they're white plastic, so they're translucent, the sunlight goes through them, and algae can grow in them. So yes, that if you paint it black, you'll solve that problem.
Also, they're not really UV stable either. The sun will make them brittle. They will crack.
Yeah. I've seen them wrapped in
Yeah, you can wrap them something.
insulation.
Something else you do here, you can put a weed pole in there. You might be able to take that plug off.
But you can,
Yeah.
you can even get 55 gallon. There's various food grade 55 gallon drums that these barrel sellers. There's a place in San Antonio called Barrel Cellar, and they sell like old olive containers and stuff that are 55 gallon drums, food grade. So you can get smaller stuff too. You don't have to go with the 275 or 330 gallon IBC totes.
I do need to tell you that it's addictive, and we started out with those 40, 50 gallon water catchment. We got those out in the front. Man, once we realized how important water is to surviving in hazardous situations, we're going all out to make sure we have water for us first of all, but then our animals and our plants, because if you don't have water, your plants aren't going to grow either. So
especially in Texas.
There you go.
Yeah.
Especially West
So,
Texas.
so do you put some kind of screening over
It's gutter guard. Yeah.
gutter guard?
Yeah.
Just over the
So it's a
down
screen.
drain or the whole
So
line?
you can see right here, that metal piece coming down, that keeps the leaves out of there and the acorns and everything else that comes.
So many live oaks. Those
Yeah.
acorns are brutal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you can look on the ground and see a bunch of them probably over in there. But yeah.
And if the acorns get in your water, they have a lot of tannins in them and will make your water taste really bad. The other thing you have to remember too is what type of roof do you have. So if you have asphalt shingles, not good for water collection because the contaminants in that. So you could collect that water for irrigation. The earth, I think, will filter it out and it won't hurt your plants or the food that the plants produce. Maybe not recommended, I don't know, but if it's all you got, it's what you got, you know. But as far as drinking water, I wouldn't do drinking water off of an asphalt shingle roof.
So our main house is actually, it's concrete tiles. It looks like terracotta, but it's actually concrete. And that comes off that pretty good. And we've got the 800 gallon over there collecting off that. But we'll move that water as we need to make sure we have enough for our new trees that we're going to plant this winter at the back of the property. And getting it uphill that far, it's not going to do gravity. That's one thing going right there to her. What do you got over there, babe?
Hydrangeas.
Hydrangeas.
All right, any other questions?
Thanks for joining us. Welcome, Kristen.
Sorry.
You're
I was
good.
being lazy this morning.
No, you're
I
good.
do actually have a question since you pointed me out.
Okay.
Is that your first flush right there, or do you have one on this?
Do we have a wet?
Like your first flush?
Yes.
Yeah,
That's-
this is the first flush right
I
here.
figured I just missed it.
And that's the overflow there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so once this fills up, you don't want to just, it's got to go somewhere. The water will go wherever it wants to go.
Right.
So you've got to have an overflow. And you could actually do a catchment system there.
From there.
Yeah, you could pipe that down and I could put another tank right here and pipe it into that one. It's still going to fill it up.
So do you clean out your first flush and
Yeah.
how often?
After every rain.
After a rain. Oh,
That's what you're supposed to. Sometimes I'm lazy.
okay.
Yeah, and I love your shirt.
Thanks.
Let's go,
My
Brandon.
favorite shirt. I've worn it so much it's starting to shrink because I've washed it so many times.
Yeah, you could hook your pump up to your secondary tank here.
I got some really hateful looks in H&E earlier.
Back up to your tank.